Welcome back to Reliving Retro, and this is Season 5, Episode 5. We have a very special guest on with us today, so go ahead and introduce yourself, buddy.
Hello, everybody. My name is DMCPCRT, the worst username that I could have thought of, and I'll say that every single time. And I do, I don't even know what you'd say, gaming content, I guess, at this point. I don't even think it's just always retro, but, you know, I like to discuss retro, obviously. But yeah, do Twitch, TikTok, and occasionally YouTube and Instagram.
Yeah, and we're doing this thing right now. We're live on DMC's Twitch, which is pretty sick.
Yeah.
We've never done this before, a live recording of the podcast, but figured it might be pretty interesting. As you can see, there's only 2 of us this week. Yaiser could not make it, sadly, but he will be back with us next week, so excited for him to return. And if you're new here, we pick one game at random, invite a guest on, and we rate it in 5 different categories: story, gameplay, visuals, sound, and how well it aged. And before we get going into this, let's find out a little bit more about our guest here at DMC. So I've asked you some of these questions before, but for the new guys, what was your introduction to gaming?
All right. I feel like I have got this down to a T at this point. I'm the youngest of 4. So by the time I was on the scene, if you will, my brothers and my sister had already had gaming consoles. So it's always just been a part of the family, if you will. But the first games I really remember playing, Castlevania, Super Mario Brothers 2, more than Super Mario Brothers 1 or 3.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was the people that lived downstairs from us. They let us borrow it a couple times, and I just loved the music and the look of it. Eventually getting into 3, but then Mortal Kombat as well. That's one of the earliest memories. And Dick Tracy for the NES. I've been thinking about that one more. I just was terrible at it, but I loved the way that one looked. So, yeah,
that one I think it gets a lot of it gets a lot of a bad rap. I think I've never played it actually, but I've seen a lot of people say that it's terrible. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's got weird controls, but it does have a good like visual style, and the music at least kind of stuck with me. So
Yeah, I can certainly understand, especially any of these games, which we talked about Paperboy last week, and I know you with your DMC drop-in, you weren't a huge fan of Paperboy for a lot of obvious reasons. I think it ages pretty poorly. The controls are really awful. The hitboxes are kind of crazy. But I had a lot of people commenting saying Paperboy was one of my favorite games for the NES, and I love that game still and stuff like that. And of course you do, right? Like there are plenty of games that even myself I played as a kid, and we got to it on the show, and I'm like, you know what? It's probably not as good as I thought it was when I was a kid, but I still love the game for how much I enjoyed it when I was a kid. You know what I mean? A lot of nostalgia there. Maniac Mansion being one of those games. It's one of those games that like I want to pick up and I want to be able to play it right away. But I'm like, you know what? Maybe if I didn't have such a sentimental attachment to this game, it probably wouldn't be as easy to pick up for me.
Perhaps.
So I totally get that. And watching you, kind of struggle to get into it, I think definitely hammered that point home, because for the most part, most of the games you stream, I feel like you can get into. There aren't many games that you're like, I'm not really feeling this one.
The only one so far that I just straight up gave up on was Link's Awakening for the Switch. That just did not resonate with me after about 2-hour stream. So about 6 hours. Yeah, I was just like, I just don't like it. I'm sorry. And that's the only one.
To be fair, after like 6 hours, I think you gave it a fair shake, I would say.
I think so. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like I try to beat the games that I start, whether I like them or not. It's just kind of like, all right, let's finish it. That way I can give the best objective thoughts on it if I can at least say I beat the game, Right. So
now you play a lot of Resident Evil on your streams. What are some other of your favorite types of games to play?
So it's been funny because it's been so much Capcom lately. I feel like too, like we have on Wednesday nights is our subscribers choice nights, which is 2 games that are selected from subscribers, and we play them until we beat them. So we're working through Onimusha right now, which is basically Resident Evil, but in feudal Japan. So it's, it's got the tank controls and all that, but it's really fun. I do like, you can call them stylistic action. So like, Devil May Cry, which is not where the name comes from. It's just in there. But I do love the Devil May Cry series. I want to get more into the Ninja Gaiden series and stuff. But yeah, RPGs like anybody else. I love, turn-based ones especially. And then Counter-Strike, I just can't stop playing that game no matter how much I try. So the Counter-Strike thing kind of answers part of my next question, but I was going to ask, what games have you been playing lately, whether on the stream or off the stream? So yep, Counter-Strike it's a thing that I play with my buddies almost every night, whether it's a match or two, except for generally Mondays and Tuesdays because I'm trying to save up my energy as I'm streaming throughout the week. Right. But yeah, that's usually what I'll do. And then, a lot of it is the games for the drop-ins. So anything that, you guys are playing, but I want to try and make footage for that. Yep. And that's been basically where I'm at. I haven't started any single player games completely on my own lately. But I'm streaming 4 games a week right now, and then if I'm doing something for the show, that's 5 games a week right now. So.
Yeah, you say lately, but you did just finish the Dragon Warrior game for the Game Boy.
Oh yeah, I did. That's true. That was 1
weeks ago, right?
That was one I just did kind of do on my own. I guess since that was one that I've kind of played already, then I didn't really count it, I suppose. But yeah, that was the Game Boy Color version. Was a lot of fun too. Like I definitely recommend it, and I actually recommend it more than the NES one. They balance the game a little bit. It's a little bit faster. There's a bit more character to it. So nice. If you play one version of Dragon Warrior, I'd say that's the one. Apparently, all of the later ports are based off the Super Nintendo version that we didn't get. So I plan on importing a bootleg of that one and playing that. So
what is that, 5 or 6?
So actually, no, they remade Dragon Warrior 1 through 4 for the Super Nintendo. So,
did they?
And then every remake of 1 through 4 after, from what I've read, now don't quote me on this, is supposedly based on those versions. So
quoted.
Mm-hmm. Oh God. Real quick, I will say we did get a comment here of from Killbot on Twitch saying that everyone is bad at Dick Tracy, so that does make me feel a little bit better. So
I also feel like everybody's bad at Paperboy too, for what it's worth.
Maybe, yeah.
I mean, there might be some like tryhards out there that are like, playing Paperboy till they die or something like that.
Paperboy sweaties.
Yeah, I don't know why you do that, but it's fine. If I guess if you want to do that, you can do that.
Yeah.
All right. Before we get into this week's game, I just want to say you can follow us at Reliving Retro on Twitter, Instagram. We're on Facebook for some reason. We are on YouTube if you're listening on Spotify. We're on Spotify if you're watching on YouTube. We also have a TikTok and we also have a Twitch where we play the game of the week, usually. So follow us on all those things. And most important of all, we have a Patreon where for $2 a week, nope, that's too much, $2 a month, you can join and submit a game for our Patreon list. Now we play one Patreon game every single month. So what episode is this? Episode 5. So episode 8 will be our next Patreon game. So if you get onto the Patreon and then you submit a game, we randomly select from those games for the Patreon. And yeah, it's a much faster way to get us to play your game. Otherwise, if you suggest a game in our comments, it kind of just gets thrown into our master list, which at this point is a few hundred games long. So yeah, it's going to take a little bit to get to it at that point. So yeah, I mean, it's this is a lot of fun. I enjoyed Metal Gear Solid for the Game Boy Color. Now, before this week, had you played it at all?
Yes, I actually did own this game at one point back when I got it from GameStop for like $12 or something used. And I had a cart for a while and I either lost it or traded it in. I don't remember exactly what happens. I'm pretty sure I lost it in band class in 8th grade. But that's about the last time I remember seeing it. And I got pretty much up to Slasher Hawk. I remember beating that as a kid, and then everything else after was completely new to me.
Yeah, and if you want to find a copy of this game currently, loose, it's going for about $90. So, yeah. It's one of the most valuable games for the Game Boy Color currently. So it's a pricey one, but I will say it's good. Yeah, it's good. I'm not trying to do any spoilers here, but it's a good. I think you should give it a shot. Now, how many hours would you say you put into it this week, DMC?
I'd say probably 8 or 9 hours. There was a lot of game overs for me. So it said that it was 5 hours and 41 minutes when I cleared. I'm like, there's no way. I mean, when we fought Metal Gear, that alone was almost 2 hours. So I think with a lot of these older games, what you'll find is that they don't count the times where you game overed, right? They only count the times where you saved and whatever. So because I felt the same way about my Silent Hill run. I had a Silent Hill run, and it I know I played for like 11 hours because I recorded every second of it. So I have 11 hours of gameplay from Silent Hill recorded on my PC. But when I finished the run, it said like 8 hours and 30 minutes. Oh, wow.
And I was like, no. I was like, no, that's not accurate. I played for way longer than that. But yeah, I probably played for about 6 hours or so. Okay. I did not finish it, unfortunately. Your stream where you streamed all day and then you were like, you know what, let's stream and let's finish this game. It made me feel like I didn't have to do it because I saw the whole ending, which was great. But I will say there are a couple parts in this game that got me extremely frustrated. But before we get into that, let's get into the story. And DMC, why don't you start us off with the story?
Okay, story is going to be a big one. So we're rating 1 out of 5. And also, real quick, my Discord's going off. I'm sorry. Oh gosh,
I can't hear it if it's to be
okay. You can't. Then you're good. All right. So story, we rate everything's rated 1 out of 5 here, right? So this is going to be a 5. I mean, it really is. This is the most intense story on a Game Boy game I've ever experienced, and you kind of expect that for Metal Gear, but it is. There's so much dialogue, almost too much at sometimes. The story is pretty good, and it is non-canon, so we're gonna have some spoilers coming up for folks who do want to play the game, just so you know.
Yeah, but, spoilers.
Yeah, it is non-canon, but there's some moments that like you and I discussed where it's just like, whoa, that really hit way harder than I anticipated. And it's a rather mature game, which I think it's also rated E, which is kind of funny. Like, it does not have a high rating.
Yeah.
So story is a 5 though. It's presented well. It's presented just like you'd think of Metal Gear. There's lots of codec conversations. There's backstabbing. There's tragedy. There's a lot of very, very good elements to it. It's almost a little cheesy at times because every time you kill a boss, it's like, here's the sad music and their backstory of why they're doing what they're doing. But it was presented so well that it's forgivable.
You know what though? With the first boss, what was his name again?
Slasher Hawk.
Yeah. So the first boss, man, that line, I can't remember exactly what he said, but I know I texted it to you and I was just like, okay, I'm not gonna lie, that line got me. And you were like, yeah, me too, Mandy. Me
so
too.
when Slasher Hawk dies, basically what the story of him is that he was adopted by Aborigines in Australia, but he wasn't from their I want to sound wrong, clan or whatever, I apologize, their group, so they didn't accept him into it. So he was always considered a misfit for his whole life as he goes around and around. And when he dies, his last words are if I'm going to the gates of heaven, will they let me in there? It's like, oh my God, that just hit like a ton of bricks. And it's like, oh, all this dude wanted was acceptance, man. He had to turn all the way to violence and extremisms just because he never was accepted. And it's like, this is a Game Boy game. So, and that's the first boss.
Yeah. It's wild. I was feeling a little low on the story, to be honest, up until that point, only because I'm like, man, I'm not a huge fan of the Kodak thing. Just because I don't like reading, you know what I'm saying? Like, reading sucks. But I'd be okay with it if they were like, okay, here's a little bit of the storyline, here's your mission. But I think it was before the second mission, maybe. My God, they went on for way too long. And I was like, this is way too much text. I don't care.
They introduced Chris Jenner and they just keep going for a long time in that section. So
it's a long portion of text there. All that being said, I gave it a 4 because I had to consider the fact that this is the Game Boy we're talking about.
Right.
And as you said earlier, how could I don't know any other Game Boy stories that are this, really in depth.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of other Game Boy games that I've played. Now, not many of them are color, to be honest. The Game Boy Color never really did it for me as a kid. But playing Final Fantasy Legend 1 and 2 or Adventure 1 and 2, I always mix it up. There's a story there, but it's very, very small. Dragon Warrior on there. Okay, Pokemon. That's a pretty basic story. Comparing it to those, which are still really good games, it's like, yeah, this one is definitely above all of those, and I like those stories too. So
right, yeah, this game you could tell they were like, the story has to mean something. It's not just a Game Boy game.
Right.
It has to mean something. And so for that, I gave it a lot of credit for that. And I also gave it a lot of credit just in the sense that it has some surprises in the story and stuff like that. You don't expect a lot of stuff that happens. So I'm just like, okay, I definitely have to give it its due.
To that point too, a surprise, again, spoiler here, folks. So if you're waiting to play this, I apologize. But did you rescue Jimmy then, the boy scientist? Were you able to find him? Okay.
Yeah.
So after he departs with you, you find him again, and he's kind of unloading, trauma dumping on you. And Snake's basically like, we're gonna get you out of here. And then his handcuffs explode right in front of Snake, killing him right in front of Snake. And it's like, holy crap! It's like, what is going on? So yeah, twists. And
I didn't get to that part.
Intense
but that's
moments. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this poor kid is just letting his guts out, and then literally lets his guts out. So.
Yeah, that's great. It's a little heavy for a Game Boy game, I must admit.
Yeah.
It is funny because you brought up the fact that this game is rated E. And I was just wondering, maybe is that like a Nintendo thing? Because normally in Metal Gear games, right, you have a cigarette that for some reason you just use. This, they called it a fogger.
Yeah, so
right?
it's like it's a vape pen before vape pens.
Yeah, they just called it a fogger, which I thought was pretty interesting. I'm like, that's probably a Nintendo thing. But yeah, all right. So I'm sorry, you said 5, right, for story?
Yeah, it's the best story I've played on the Game Boy, and it's even in its weakest moments, it's really just because you can tell that they had to keep it small. It's only like 2 megs or something like that. It's a very small game at the end of the day.
Yeah, I saw somebody say that. It's a 5.5 hour game if you know what you're doing, really. And to get that long of a game out of 2 megs is kind of crazy.
Yep, with that much detail too. So
yeah, which we'll get into some of the detail because it is pretty amazing. All right, let's move over to gameplay.
You can start with that one.
Yeah, I'm gonna kick it off for gameplay here. I gave it a 4. And there's 2 major gripes I have with the gameplay. I'm just gonna go gripes first because there's a lot of good things to talk about.
Okay.
The first gripe I have with the gameplay is the weapon/item system. I know this is exactly what this is all they really could do with the Game Boy, right? They had 2 buttons and the D-pad, and that's it. So credit where credit's due. You're able to do a lot of things in the game. I'm not trying to take it away because you can do a lot in the game. There's a ton of different items, ton of different weapons that you can use, and that's all great. But my God, does it take out of the action hitting that select button and have to like shuffle through your weapons and stuff like that. It's fairly annoying. That was a gripe. And then just the map I thought was really bad.
Yeah,
Again, it's a Game Boy, right? So not trying to knock it too hard. That's why I didn't kill it, right? Because I could have killed it for a couple of these things that just would have made the game easier to play. But I still gave it a 4, which is in my opinion, a very good score. But the map was pretty bad, and the map being bad, I think, led to this mouse in a maze type of feeling you have in this game a little bit, which can be a little obnoxious. Also, I'm not terrible. Stop giving me terrible ratings for everything. Okay.
I got poor once.
Yeah, I got poor once too, and I was just like, you know what? That's a win right there because I got poor one time. But no, it's just funny because like, okay, I got caught 8 times. Listen, I'm not playing the stealth game the way you want me to play it. Okay. At this point of like running around in this warehouse, I've been running around in here for like 37 minutes. So I'm going to get a terrible because I've been running around so long. So I might as well just run by people and punch them in the back of the head. Yeah, I give it a 4, but there's tons of good stuff. Let's get into that when you talk about your gameplay.
Sure. So my gripes are kind of similar. The map was definitely one where it's like, I get it. But like, man, it still isn't that good. And if you were to play this on the actual Game Boy, which I did play, I'd say half of it on a GBA SP. The other half was doing the Game Boy player on the TV behind me. And on the Game Boy, it was very hard to see what was going on there. Game Boy player definitely had better advantage, which was key when you were fighting Metal Gear. But there is some issues that I have with it as far as hitboxes, which again is very bad when you're fighting the final boss. Like it's very hard to see what's going on there. The AI is good and almost too good even on like easier like difficulties, because if you get discovered, 3 guys are there almost instantly, and it is almost impossible to get away from them without getting like half your health taken away, unless you just mow them down and then you lose all your ammo. So so that could be a skill issue thing, so I'm really not knocking it too much. But yeah, as far as that goes, that's probably my biggest gripe was the map at the end of the day, and the hitboxes. Some of them were just kind of goofy, like using explosives, you could kill yourself by accident pretty easily. And that was an inconvenience of mine for sure.
I didn't run into the hitbox issue as much as you probably did, especially because I think the major issue was Metal Gear itself with the hitboxes. So I didn't really get to take it down a peg for that. But what did you end up rating gameplay?
I would give it a 4.25 because it's still really good. The positives are that they really did get the Metal Gear experience on the handheld. Like you can crawl underneath things to hide. You can use the cardboard box. The AI will react to you tapping on walls and stuff to get them to follow you, knocking people out to leave them there so that their teammate sees it and all that kind of stuff. It is Metal Gear on the Game Boy. It's incredibly impressive. So
it's honestly like if you're talking about like I'm not saying degrading like it's bad, but like the opposite of downgrading, I guess.
Yeah, downgrading. Yeah,
downgrading a game, because obviously the original came out for the PlayStation. Obviously, this is a downgrade from the original, but this might be one of the best downgrade the games I've ever played.
Yeah,
I could not believe how
remake, if you will. Yeah,
I could not believe how just accurate this game was to the other PlayStation Metal Gear games that I've played.
I think one minor thing that I think you can do this in regular Metal Gear is that I tried crawling against the wall when cameras were like zooming up and down. Doesn't work in this one. You will get detected, which is kind of bogus because I swear you can do that in regular Metal Gear Solid. So that's not anything that I'll take some points off of. But I was like, wait a minute, can't I do that? So that was kind of annoying.
Yeah.
And then one last thing was the Nikita with the cameras just did not seem consistent. Like getting them to get past certain cameras was fine. Other times it would automatically shoot them down or get detected. And I'm like, I swear I was in just the same path and was able to get past you. So that's just a minor gripe. But yeah, I'd say 4.25 is definitely where we're at for that.
And I think another good part about this game is, again, the amount of content that they're able to fit onto this cartridge is kind of unbelievable. It's not just the story mode. They have like the VR training and everything like
90
that. 90
stages of VR.
Yeah, that's
90.
Wild.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So I didn't really play through those that much, but from what I could tell, they're kind of like time trial types of stages, right? Where you just you need to kind of complete the objective within the amount of time or whatever, and you can like set like high scores and stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's it's training at the end of the day too. So it maybe if I did those, I'd be able to use the Nikita better. I don't know, but having 90 stages for that is cool. When you beat the game too, you unlock special mode, which is basically like, hey, try and do stage 3 without getting detected at all. So it's almost like a VR training, but it's in the actual game. So there's hours worth of content in this. You could probably say 20 plus hours if you try to do everything.
Which for a Game Boy Color game is wild. Like I remember like some of the first Game Boy Color games I bought were like WrestleMania 2000, and that had like 3 different match types and like 8 wrestlers, and I was done with it on the by the time I got home. Like the car ride home, I was like, okay, I figured out the game, beat all the wrestlers. You know what I mean? It's kind of over now. This game could have you playing it for months.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's pretty impressive, what they're able to fit on this cartridge. Was there anything else you wanted to say about gameplay before we move over to visuals?
One minor thing, which you could say is a plus or a negative, is that the way that it's set up is it's not like a regular Metal Gear Solid. You can't go back. It's like it is individual stages that you progress through. So you might go through areas you were in, but I missed the machine gun on the second level. And by missing that, I didn't have it for 2 more stages in my playthrough. And if you go back to that stage and get the gun, it doesn't matter for your playthrough that you have saved. So that's, again, kind of a skill issue thing. I kind of just want to make people aware that like, if you miss things, you're going to miss them through your playthrough. You can't go back like you do in regular Metal Gear Solid. So kind of a neat thing, but also frustrating when it's like, man, I could really use that rifle right now. So
that's one of the things where when we get to aged, it's going to be something that kind of poorly reflects age, but not necessarily the gameplay, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yep. And then last thing too, since fighting all the bosses were pretty good. The first one was pretty simple, Slasher Hawk.
Yep.
The second one was Marionette Owl, which you had to use like the VR, or not the VR, I always say that, the infrared goggles to see where they were, and make sure that you switched it at just the right time as well, because they blind you. So if you you have to pause the game, like you were saying, and switch. So it's actually a really cool element for that, because if you do it too soon or too late, then you're blinded for like 5 seconds as opposed to being blinded for like half a second. Yeah. So it is kind of a cool element. Pyro Bison was fine. And then fighting against Viper, that fight was really chaotic and one that I had to do over and over. The last thing too on that, and I should dang it for it, is that you can't skip cutscenes, but that's something we'll bring up to aged later. Not being able to skip cutscenes really is annoying. So
I did want to mention there was another thing that I wanted to mention, and now I can't remember what I wanted to mention. Isn't that awful?
Sorry.
It happens, dude. All right, let's move on for now. If I think of it, I'll bring it back up. But let's move over to visuals. All right,
am I starting?
Yeah, go ahead.
I had to do it again. 5. This is the best looking Game Boy game I've ever played. It is just bonkers how good this looks. The art style that they were able to translate over to the game, that's like the Metal Gear Solid cover art and stuff like that, is great. The amount of level design that they have in it is awesome. And I mean, the Game Boy Color still is only able to put out, I think, like 8 colors at a time or something like that. So it's not like they can use a huge palette, but it's still just, it looked great. Like, you really were thinking, if you were playing this in 2000, you're remembering playing the NES not too long before. And it's like, all right, here's an actual NES game in my pocket, and here we go. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous Game Boy game. The presentation is awesome.
I'm right there with you. 5 stars. Some of the animations in this game blew me away. The fact that when Snake was running, you could see his bandana flapping. I thought that was really, really cool.
Even the running animation looks good. It's so fluid, which is bonkers.
Yep, looks really, really good. Another thing I thought was cool was when you press start, you crawl, and you can crawl through high grass. And the fact that like you're partially covered and you can tell exactly like what it's supposed to look like for the Game Boy, that kind of blew me away. I thought that like, again, we just came off of playing like Paperboy, and Brian Rigsby, our guest, he actually tweeted it out. He's like, is a crashed Paperboy the worst NES sprite ever? And it is. It looks so bad. So them being able to put like a crawling snake through the high grass and make it look so good is just really impressive on a system that is, I mean, technically worse than the NES. So
if anyone needs an example of just what they can pull off too, just go on YouTube and watch the intro video of where Campbell starts talking to Snake that plays before you even start the game. And you know, there's snakes. I think he's smoking, or it's implied that he's smoking, and it's gritty, but then you see lasers slowly appear on him because, you know, he's been running away from Foxhound and stuff. So there's just these little details that are so good for a Game Boy game. And then just expect that through the rest of the game.
And all of the what are the enemies called? Troops, guards?
I don't think they're called genome soldiers in this. So yeah, they're what is it? Soldiers? They're the GLF. That's what they were.
GLF. Oh, yeah. So the GLF, like when they're like pacing around, right? One of the things that I noticed that I actually thought was really impressive was the fact that when they stop and they look left and right, you can tell which direction they're looking, and before like they move on. And I was just like, that's just added animation that for a Game Boy game, you wouldn't think anybody else would have like a second thought to put that like extra effort into it. I couldn't believe that they did that. Again, just blown away by all the effort put into the animation and stuff. I 100% agree. Five stars for this one. The visuals, it's easily the best Game Boy game I've ever seen.
And you knew what everything was too. There was no needing the imagination here. You knew what it was. So
exactly. All right, moving over to sound. I gave it a 4.5. I was pretty close to giving it a 5, considering like just Game Boy and everything that they can do on here. Man, the sound effects I thought were great, but really blew me away is the soundtrack, which really just never stops. It's so good all the way through. I can't remember. Me and DMC, we tried to look it up before the show. I can't remember the name of the soundtrack or like the track that I actually really enjoyed. But it was during stage 06. I remember it because that's the one I played for 4 hours seemingly. The stupid one where you have to get into a box and then you have to go onto the conveyor belt, and then you have to get a different colored box to get onto a different conveyor belt, and it's literally you getting on boxes for 10 minutes straight. And could have done without that whole level.
And then they turn off those and you have to crawl through it, so it gets even more complicated. But that was one of the most challenging levels. That, and you didn't get to, we should have mentioned this during gameplay too, but there's another one where you have to blow up 4 pillars with C4 charges rather. And it's randomized, so it's never the same on every playthrough. So like I tried to look it up because I was lost for a while, and then I realized it's like, no, it's randomized, good luck. So that stage took me almost 2 hours, like the actual playthrough time.
I mean, that's another thing that you can either be like, this is really cool about the game, the fact that it's randomized, or you can say it's like a negative thing about the game. But the fact that they were able to do like a randomized level on the Game Boy is pretty impressive. But yeah, I landed on 4.5 for sound. I was really impressed with it just about all the way through.
I feel so bad when I give a game such high praise like all the time, but it's 5. What can the Game Boy? What else could you expect out of the Game Boy? Like the only soundtrack I could think that's even comparable is actually another Konami game from a while before, which is Castlevania 2, because some of those songs in there are just bonkers, but that's just the audio for that as far as music goes. This has great, the gunfire sounds good, the explosions sound good, the alert sounds just like it's from the system, from the PS1 and stuff. It's like those little details are just so good. The codec sounds good. Everyone's little ... has different tonality to it, so Snake's is a little bit more grizzled or lower toned, if you will, versus Mei Ling or something like that. So that there's just those little touches that really seal the deal and give it a perfect score. But the music is so good. The sneaking around song I just keep doing in my head all day now, and it builds more and more to be kind of spookier and like, what are you doing here kind of thing. And yeah, the music is just It's so good. It's so good.
It really is. All right, let's move over to Aged. And you want to kick us off for Aged?
Sure. So I did look up reviews for this just out of curiosity to see what people thought of it when it came out nearly 25 years ago.
That's a good idea. I didn't do that.
And it got perfect scores from a lot of people. IGN gave it a 10 out of 10, things like that. It was very well loved. So that makes me kind of think, okay, for back then, this was a perfect game. But looking at it through today's lens, because we're reliving retro, I would probably give it a 4. I think that's where I landed on with it. Because again, there's a few issues I have with it. The unskippable cutscenes by today's standards is just a nightmare. You should be able to skip those, or it should give you an option like, hold, start, and select to do that. Remember, I was trying any button combination to see if it was like a hidden thing, and I accidentally reset my game because I did A, B, and start and select, and it reset. And I was like, oh, cool. So I was hoping that, and I know it's a minor gripe, but still, there's that. What was it? The lack of text that can show up in a box is also bothersome. That's what I think made some of those moments kind of annoying, where it just felt like Campbell was going on, but it's only because he could fit 10 words in a box.
Yeah, so, it's like a sentence and a half, and you're just like hammering that A button, getting through this. Yeah.
And it's like, all right, so those little things kind of bring it down. And then, the control thing, like we mentioned, with switching your weapons and all that, it's a product of its time. You really can't improve upon that because it only has, 4 face buttons and a D-pad. So, but that's the Aged of it. So everything else though is still great. The story is still pretty good. It is kind of goofy how they treat Snake, like looking at it through today's lens, which I'm not knocking the story for that, but they basically boil it down to a love story. And it's that's kind of weird. That's not what Snake would do.
it's very uncharacteristic of Snake, and it's kind of takes a left turn there at some point in the story, but it's interesting to see nonetheless.
But
I'm sure Metal Gear
else, but go ahead.
I'm sure Metal Gear fans, like when they played it, they were like, this is interesting.
Chris, I love you. It's like, oh no, wait, what? I mean, he doesn't say that, but it's very much implied. I'm gonna go back to the States. What?
Yeah.
Anyway, but so other than that though, it's a game that's worth playing. Like I like comparing it to if it was released today as well. And I feel like if it was released as like Metal Gear Gaiden or something like that on Steam for $5 or $10, I still think it would get pretty good praise, and people would be like, yeah, this is, a fun throwback to the original Metal Gear style. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is one that I would love to see them throw up onto like Switch online, because I think it would actually get a ton of play, especially which we didn't talk about yet, but all the Metal Gear remakes that are coming out now for the PlayStation. So I think maybe
in there.
Yeah, right. Why not? Right. I landed a little bit lower than you, but I landed on a 3.5 for Aged. But basically for all the same stuff you said, you know what I mean? Like it kind of felt like we were playing an old game. But really that's just a Game Boy. You know what I mean? Like there's not much more it can improve upon for the Game Boy. It's basically a flawless Game Boy game, essentially. I really don't know how they could make a Game Boy Metal Gear game better than the one that they already made.
And I think a fair comparison too, if we were to go back and even put it against something to see the improvements, is play the original Metal Gear on like the NES, for example, and then play this. You can see there's a huge quality jump between the two. Now I know the Metal Gear on the NES is considered mid, but like you can just tell, like, all right, in that time for rather similar systems, one is clearly better than the other. So
and they kind of took the same formula from the NES, obviously, because they couldn't make it exactly like the PS1 version. But now, just curious, you've played through a bunch of the Metal Gears yourself, right? Where would this rank for you amongst the Metal Gear games?
I can see why it's a side story. I think it would have to be below the core 5, no question. And Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are all better than this in their own right. But it's that's almost unfair to compare them, especially as time goes on. I have beat this, but I haven't beaten the original Metal Gear or Metal Gear 2. So there is that. I've gotten pretty far in the original Metal Gear, but that's cryptic at points. So
yeah.
But I'd say it's better. It's no better than any of the console releases. But I don't know if that's really a fair comparison.
I mean, they have a lot. There's more to do on those, essentially.
Sure.
So it's kind of tough to just straight up be like, yeah, these these are just better. They
also have the benefit of shoulder buttons. So
true. Yeah. If this had maybe waited a couple years and came out for the Game Boy Advance, could you imagine how much better it would have been?
Could you imagine it? Yeah, if this was a GBA game where they had that extra bit of time with it, it would have been gorgeous probably, and played so great, and still had weird audio because the Game Boy Advance audio is bad. But you know,
but I could have dealt with like L and R being used as weapons. That would have been a lot easier for me.
Yep, quick swapping and all that kind of stuff would have just made it a bit more fluid for sure. But it is a product of its time. So,
which is funny because the last Game Boy game we played together was Mario and Luigi, and I had an issue with that one as well.
That's true. If only it had 2 more shoulder buttons,
which I guess is why it was played on the PS1. But to be fair, I got to find something to complain about. No, overall, this game got really, really good scores from both of us. I came in at a 4.2. DMCU came in at a 4.65.
Wow.
Obviously, I'm going to go ahead and just say I would recommend that you relive this game. Go ahead and play it. If you've never played it before, even if you played it back then and you're like, I don't know, I remember enjoying it when I was a kid. Should I play it again? Yeah. Pick it up, play it. It's good. DMC agree?
Absolutely. This is a game that with retro gamers especially, it's a slept-on gem. It was produced late in the Game Boy's life. It came out in 2000. The Game Boy Advance came out 2001, right? So it was very late in the lifespan.
Yep.
Not many of them were sold, from what I understand, too. But yeah, definitely play this game if you're a fan of Metal Gear. It is worth it. There's some cool nods to the story because basically, just a real quick thing too, is that this story takes place 2 years after the original Metal Gear. So there's a lot of nods to it. You can actually find the original Metal Gear in the base before the end of the game. So you should definitely check that out. It's got some cool nods to the series. It's got, Campbell's in it, Mei Ling's in it, so Snake. It's just, it's fun. It's a challenging game. I played it on normal and it still kicked my ass. I died probably 50 times without question in this game.
I played it on easy, I
think. Were you dying a lot then too, or no?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a hard game.
Yeah.
And the harder difficulties spawn more enemies, by the way. If you didn't know that, there is even more guards than what we were playing. So these guys that I saw speedrunning it, I'm like, God, man, you know where everything is. But yeah, definitely play this game.
How fast could they speedrun it? Do you know the record? Did you look that up?
I only saw that one video I sent you that was 4.5 hours, but they didn't skip any video.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So yeah, I mean that's a pretty good time, I gotta say. Okay, real quick, I'm gonna look up the speed running
speedrun record.
Yeah, because now you got me interested here. I never know how to search it because it's just Metal Gear Solid.
Well, I always type in Game Boy afterwards. So Metal Gear Solid Game Run. So Ghost Babel, which is what the title is outside of the States, by the way, is Ghost Babel, which is the project that the Metal Gear thing was under. So there's people who have it in an hour and 12 minutes.
That's wild.
And these are just in the past year or two. So there's people that are still running this game. So yeah, it's a worthwhile game. I mean, I know we got some people on Twitch, I don't know if I'm allowed to say emulate it. I wouldn't say that legally, but
I mean, hey, if you need to, you need to, you know what I'm saying? Yep. You don't have $90 to go get a cartridge, and I mean, you'll need more than that if you don't have a Game Boy too.
What I would not suggest you do is I would not suggest you go on AliExpress, and I would not suggest you buy a $30 Game Boy cart that has every game on it that uses an SD card reader. I would not suggest you do that and use that in your Game Boy player. Don't do that.
Right.
Sometimes it's the only way to relive the retro, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, so now's the time of the show where we randomly select what game we're going to play next, and then I like to vaguely describe it for our guests to guess. However, we do have some other people on Twitch right now.
Yeah, let's have the Twitch people guess. I like that.
So maybe we have some of the Twitch people guess what we're going to play.
Whoever gets it right first on Twitch will shout you out. How's that sound?
Oh, that sounds great. So let's do that. Let me hit the randomizer. All right, Twitch guys, you ready? DMC, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. We have a first-person shooter developed by Rare, published by Nintendo, on the Nintendo 64, released in May of the year 2000.
All right. So, first-person shooter Oh, Skillless Caden nailed it. Perfect dark without even missing a beat.
So quick.
Crushed it. Good job. That's it. That's got to be it, right? Final answer?
Nailed it. Perfect dark. There I mean, it was two that it was going to be between, right? It was either going to be GoldenEye or Perfect Dark, and it is indeed Perfect Dark. Now,
I think I would have guessed GoldenEye myself because I feel like I played that way later. We got our Nintendo 64 after 2000 for sure. So
yeah. So you've played Perfect Dark before?
Never. Not even
you
once.
Never played that one?
Never. So I guess I'll drop in for that one.
I gave it a shot when I used to like collect really hardcore. I gave it a shot for about 5-10 minutes just to see if the game worked. And that was pretty much how I played games while I collected. I just threw it in there for 5-10 minutes to see if it worked. And if it did, I was like, sick, or we're good. And if it didn't work, then I was like upset about it. But we're, so
I don't even know if I own a copy. I think I did at one point and I just gave it away. So yeah.
We'll go get another one. I don't think they're that expensive.
What I wouldn't suggest you do, I'm just kidding.
You can if you want to. I'm
gonna have to. Yeah, I probably will.
You can get a cart right now for about $16.
Yeah, it's not that expensive.
That's the average. I'm sure at your local game store they're about $20.
Does that mean that you'll do the most FPSs for the show so far on the Nintendo 64?
Isn't that wild? We've only done two this will be our third FPS. I think they're all on N64.
What's the other one besides Quake?
We did Turok.
Oh well, God! So all three of them have been N64 ones with massive smoke effect.
Yep.
Well, Quake's wasn't that bad, but anyway.
This is supposedly the best FPS on the system. So
another late one, right? That one came out pretty late in 2000.
Yep, 2000. Yep. Same year this Metal Gear game came out. So
there you go.
Back to back.
There is a Perfect Dark for the Game Boy Color as well. I do know that. So
I saw that. It's listed here actually.
It's a pretty expensive one too, right?
Is it?
I think so. Now we're just riffing, folks. Let's see. Perfect.
Yeah, we
Dark
can riff a little bit.
Game Boy Color. Also, I have to make my game suggestion. Don't forget that.
Yeah, I won't. $30 for Game Boy Color.
Oh, that's not too bad. Okay.
No,
that's pretty affordable.
All right, well, let's get to that now. Actually, while you mentioned it, so every week we have a guest. We have our guest recommend a retro game for us to put on our master list, and we consider retro over here anything pre-HD era, right? So anything pre-PS3, Xbox 360, and Wii. Even though Wii technically wasn't HD, but Nintendo's always a step back from everybody else, so we give it the pass there. All right, so do you have a recommendation for us for our?
As always, I have two because I can't just do one. First of all, because I know you guys try to play games that are under 6 hours, Dragon Warrior for the Game Boy Color. You can beat it in about 4. That's pretty short. I definitely think you guys should give that one a shot. And then one that I was suggested to play, shout out to Athena and Ashima, a Twitch subscriber, Ronald McDonald's Treasure Land Adventure for the Sega Genesis. It is incredible. I cannot believe how good that game was. It blew me away with how much fun it was. It is arguably the best licensed game I've played in the past decade. Like, it's just that good.
That's amazing. So would you consider that one of your top Genesis games?
Absolutely. Hands down. It's like,
that's crazy because you're kind of a Genesis guy, huh?
Yeah, it's a fun game. Like it's a fever dream, but the music is great. The gameplay is solid. It's not too hard, but it's also not too easy. There's just it has no right being as good as it is.
Is it better than any of the Sonics?
Better than Sonic 3D Blast for sure.
But not better than Spinball.
Oh, it's better than Spinball as well. I hate Spinball.
Come on,
I'm not a Spinball fan. I think I don't know if I'd say it's better than Sonic 3. I had so much fun with
Spinball with my daughter the other day. Anyway, go ahead.
Maybe it's on par with Sonic 3 because I'm not a huge Sonic 3 fan, but Sonic Knuckles 2 and 1 are better. So
okay. Gotcha. Yeah, I'm definitely excited to give both those games a shot. Honestly, Dragon Warrior, it will be nice to play like an RPG in a week because really normally we only get the RPGs once every 3 months essentially because RPGs are so long that we want to give ourselves ample time to play. We want to have 2 weeks to really digest an RPG. So that's kind of the goal there. But yeah, we're super excited for Perfect Dark next week. Thanks as always, DMC, for coming on. And like I said before, you can follow us at Reliving Retro on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube if you're listening on Spotify if you're watching on YouTube. We're over on Twitch as well. And don't forget our Patreon, where for as little as $2 a month, you can go on there and recommend a game for us to play. And don't forget to go follow our guy DMC PCRT on TikTok and on Twitch. Thanks for dropping in, buddy.
No problem.
This was a lot longer of a drop in than you normally do, but
I love these though. You know this. I always love doing this. So
always nice to have you stick around. That's it for us for this week, guys, and take care.